Welcome to an encore episode of Laugh Through It All. Join me as I talk to Sabina, who discusses her struggles with anxiety and depression as a teen. This is a must see episode for all parents. Sabina, thank you so much for joining me. I have a huge appreciation and interest in all forms of mental health, but especially depression, because I have dealt with it also and in adulthood. I didn't as a child, but I did in
Mhm.
adulthood. If you could maybe just tell us, your journey.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm honored that you wanted to talk to me about this. So
Of
I love
course.
talking about this. I think mental health is a very important topic that's not talked about enough because everybody deals with mental health struggles at some point in their life. But for me personally, it did start pretty early. I started noticing, or I guess experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety around when I was like 13 or 14, like early teen years. I had always had a history of like friend issues. So I never really had a lot of close friends. I feel like I had a lot of self-doubt with myself. And I think just entering like early teen years where things are starting to change
Ab-
makes it a lot more overwhelming, especially trying to fit in and just dealing with normal teen stuff in school, and then not feeling your best on top of that, and having a lot of social issues. It's really hard, especially during that time when you're sort of like coming into your own.
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with the hormones, puberty, and everything else.
Mhm.
And middle school is terrible. I mean,
Oh, it's awful.
when I first started teaching, I taught middle school,
Mm.
and it's a terrible time for kids because you're trying to figure out, your own place in the world. You've got your hormones. Now, how was social media when you were in middle school? Was it as big?
I remember when Instagram had their original logo, and that's when I was in middle school. That like it was an actual camera.
Okay,
there
yes.
And it wasn't as big. I remember I didn't have Snapchat until I was in high school, but Instagram was getting bigger. Not a lot of kids my age were on Facebook, but a lot of them were on Instagram. For me, it was difficult because I had such difficulty with social, like friends in that time, for it to be so new, and then also being able to see like, oh, my friends are hanging out without me and they're
Oh,
posting, and
yes.
it's just like not a good feeling, and it wasn't talked about because it wasn't something that was super experienced, or I guess very new for social media in general. But I remember seeing things on that and being very upset by it, especially with my sensitivities to that in the first place. And then going through what I was going through made it very difficult, made me a lot more sensitive to that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I see it with my own daughter who is 13, and she can easily look up and see that all her friends are together and
Hmm.
nobody invited her. And as a parent, it kills me,
Hmm.
And so I know that some of these mental health issues can be even more prevalent because of stuff like that. It just I feel like it jump starts it. That just takes it from 0 to 100. And then
Hmm.
there's really, because then you start to spiral. I think I worry about it right now more than she
Yeah.
does. But so for you, you said you were a teenager when you started struggling a little bit. And then when did you really notice that it was more than just feeling sad? Or when did you first start to realize that it was more of an issue? And what were your signs?
Oh, it's sometimes it's difficult to think about because I feel like a lot of that era of my life is blocked out for
Oh,
a lot of
absolutely.
so it does take me a second, so I apologize.
Ab-
But
Absolutely. I get it. I understand.
I think I knew before a lot of people in my life did. My mom always said I was the best actress
Yes.
because she never would have expected. For me, it was a lot of years of just like stopping it down, gonna think about it, where I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to acknowledge it. I didn't want other people to know. I noticed, I think, when it became more prevalent to me that it was like something that I needed help with was like going from middle school to high school. It was a bigger school. There was more kids. There was lot of noise, and I'm very sensitive to like overstimulation.
Me too.
So with that like anxiety, it can make it so
Sure.
much worse, like sitting in the cafeteria and hearing all these people around you, crowded hallways trying to get to class. That's,
Yes.
I think, when it started to get a little much. And I don't remember if it was me or my mom who was like, I want to look into seeing a therapist, or at least me looking into seeing a therapist.
Right.
But starting to talk with a therapist who allowed me to sort of acknowledge those things that I was ignoring for such a long time.
Depression and anxiety a lot of times go hand in hand. So do you think
Mm.
when you first started, it was more of an anxious anxiety feeling, or was it more of a depression?
Would say it was more of a depression. It was tricky for me too, just because I wasn't in tune with my emotions.
Okay.
One of the biggest things I struggled with was actually like knowing what I was feeling, where it just felt bad and I didn't
Yeah.
know why. And looking back now, I can see it was more depression. The funny thing about anger that I learned, and like I had a lot of outbursts, especially as a teenager, is that anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is not just anger. Anger is always caused by something else. So my anger, my outbursts, like I would come home from school crying and like sobbing because I held that in all day long,
Yes.
throw my backpack down, like start just crying. And I would be so angry. And it was because I was so sad that the sadness was so uncomfortable. Let's channel it into anger instead. Um, and so that was something I worked on a lot. And I think one of the things that I dealt with very early on didn't appear to me as depression when it was depression. That just deep, deep sadness.
I think that's very intuitive, very informative for people listening because as a teacher, I see that same thing where people will say, he's so good at home at school, but then they come home and they're terrible. And
Mm,
they may be crying or they're having
mhm,
outbursts. And that's such an important thing for people to know is sometimes they are holding in all of those feelings trying to be good.
mhm,
They want to be good. And so they're trying to be good all day. And then they go home where they feel comfortable and can let it
mhm.
all go.
And that's the thing too, is that like home, when that to me is a sign that home is a safe place.
Hmm.
Um, at school, you can't express those feelings and you
Sure.
feel like you have to hold them in. I never want, like, I especially if there's any, parents listening to this, is that I don't think, for at least for me, like coming home and being angry and being difficult was not a sign that I was upset to be home. Just like I'm finally comfortable, I can finally let this out. And it can be kind of
Absolutely.
scary to watch, but
Yes.
at least it's like, this is my comfort place, that I feel like I can be vulnerable and let this out because I need to.
I think a lot of people who have never, or at least never knew that they had depression or never had to deal with depression, they think that it's just you're sad or you can't get out of bed. Some people
Mhm.
fake it. You would have never have known because faked it. I am
Mhm.
a very laughy, happy person. And so most people would have never have known that that's what I was dealing with.
Mhm.
And, knowing that I needed some help. What for you do you think when you realized this was a deeper issue and needed more help?
I think with me just holding in so much of it and holding on to that sort of feeling of sadness, and it becoming something normal, it opened up, I think, the doors for me to start getting feelings of hopelessness, emotional numbness, to the point where I was feeling really desperate. Nothing really felt like I had fun with. I didn't really look forward to anything. I remember with high school in particular, it was very stressful because they were starting to talk about college and
Mm.
like becoming an adult. And to me, I was like, I'm not ready yet. This is
Sure.
terrifying. I mean, in middle school, I was a gifted and talented kid. And then when I went into high school, I was taking several AP classes at the time that I started to not do so well in. And I think partially that was because, especially in those AP classes, they talk a lot about like going to college and passing the AP exams and doing the SATs. And that to me was so overwhelming. And then to watch all of my classmates not struggling with this sort of thing, start doing really well in their classes, and I'm falling behind. It became very overwhelming, and it didn't seem like I think I got to a point where life, comparatively to like as a child, like really young, seemed so much brighter. And now I'm looking forward to the future, which is they're just telling me how difficult it's going to be.
Right.
And it's scary. I think once I started getting, I don't think, at least from my experience, I don't think feelings of hopelessness is necessarily for everybody with depression. But for me, it was a really big thing where I was like, what am I going to look forward to? And I couldn't think of anything.
Right.
And that's when I was like, I might need some more help because there's a whole life ahead of me and I would like to be excited for it. And right now I am not excited for it. It's daunting.
I think that's important too, is that I mean, you knew then, you
Mhm.
knew that you wanted to be, I'm getting teary-eyed. Um, you knew that you wanted to be excited about
Mhm.
life. And I
Mhm.
think, I'm sorry. Uh, I think that that is something that a lot of people think, I
Mhm.
don't feel good about anything. I don't want to get out of bed in the morning.
Mhm.
I don't want to make dinner. I don't want to go to work. But you do have the want to be happy, to want to do all,
Yeah.
and live a fulfilled life. During those times, I moved forward for my kids. So, I mean, you were a child, different struggles, different thoughts. And for me, it was an adult, and I lived solely for my kids. I mean, I mean, they still are my life, but that's what kept me going. I mean, and I'm going to be very honest, I never had, like suicidal thoughts, things like that, that
Mhm.
that I did not have, but I did just feel just, like, what is this life? It's just shitty. It doesn't work out the way you think it's going to work out. Didn't have the things that I thought I would have at my age. And so if it wasn't for them, that was my why, and why I needed to become better.
Mhm.
And
I think, oh, sorry.
oh, no, 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 no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I I think that why is the most important thing, and that can make the difference between it getting worse and it getting better.
Yes.
Um, it's, and I think one of the things that I have come to learn is that the world does, it sucks, it sucks, the whole, like, working, nobody wants to work, nobody wants,
Yes.
it's, the whole thing is an inconvenience.
Right.
But that process of accepting yourself as a little tiny speck on
Right.
another little tiny speck, like none of, I think the most freeing thing, and it sounds kind of silly, but the most freeing thing that I have come to realize is that nothing matters. And that for a while was one of the reasons why I felt depressed, is that, well, none of this matters. But if you kind of give yourself the space to view it as, look at all this opportunity I have. At least I know that that mean thing I said to that person, and I apologize, or I feel bad, or I did this thing, that doesn't matter. I can focus instead on, okay, well, how can I make this better for myself? How can I take this as an opportunity to do something for me, to improve myself?
Right.
Um, it's weird because it sounds really sad that nothing matters and we're just a little speck and insignificant, but it gives you like the freedom to be like, okay, well, none of this matters. I might as well just stick it out, see what happens. So what's the why? What would be the reason for me to end this when it doesn't matter anyway? So I might as well just see how this plays out.
Let me ask you this question. I unfortunately know people actually who their kids have committed suicide. This is so emotional. This is an emotional episode for me today. Um, when you're in that frame of mind, what do you think is the most important thing to tell yourself that keeps you from making that decision? That snap decision? And you may not know that answer, but maybe just speaking of yourself, what because when you're a child, you think that nothing's ever gonna get better.
Mhm.
As an adult, I think we can kind of rationalize that and think, okay, this is a bad day, this is a bad week, but I
Mhm.
know that it's going to get better. I mean, I shouldn't say all adults, but yes, but some people feel hopeless in their situation. But
Mm.
what do you think would be an important thing for someone in their teens or say to themselves that would keep them going another day?
That is a hard question.
I know. Maybe
For
just
me
for yourself. Yeah.
for me, it was pretty difficult. I think there were a lot of times where I couldn't come up with anything, and I was trying to. I think at that age too, everything seems so important. A lot of people do say that teenagers feel invincible, and for a lot of it, they do, where it doesn't, that consequence that doesn't really seem a whole lot as important as the actual situation.
Right.
Um, so it can be difficult at that age, but I think for me, a lot of the times I had to lean on resources that I prepared for myself. Down the line, we had put things in place, coping skills and tools that I could use to at least take that feeling and put it somewhere else. A lot of the times, I think that sort of like hopeless, sad feeling is so overwhelming that it's even hard to just kind of go through like the thoughts of self-talk. I think now it's a lot easier for me
Sure.
to tell myself those things like you were saying. But I think as a teen, it was almost more helpful for me to take it and put it somewhere else. I remember my mom actually would do this with me as she after a lot of work with her too, because she did a lot of work on her part learning how to better support me. She would go, do you want to just write it down on a piece of paper? We'll burn it over the toilet. We'll throw it in the toilet. And now it's gone. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Like that sort of visualization, I'm gonna take
Sure.
those thoughts out of my head. I'm gonna put them on paper. I'm gonna get rid of them. They're gone.
I love that.
And you know,
Yes.
um, and I think the presence of a support system is so important at that age. I think it's important for anybody, but I think for teenagers especially, it is very important, and I can understand how it can be very difficult for parents to know what to do and how to support their child, especially with something they're not familiar with. It can be really confusing, really overwhelming.
Your support system, your family, your mom, your dad, and a therapist, friends at that time who was supportive or, knew what you were going through?
In my public school, I did have friends that knew what I was going through. It wasn't until I actually ended up transferring. My mom fought tooth and nail to get my public school to put me in a more supportive environment where I was put into, not, gosh, I don't know what it's called, but I was put in a therapeutic school where
Okay.
there were more supports for me in place. And it was mainly because I had so many friend troubles and a lot of issues in the public school, and then I had a lot more friends. But for me in my public school, especially not in an environment where all of my friends, everybody around me is dealing with similar things that I'm dealing with, it can be hard because those friends can be very judgmental. I remember I was out of school for a few weeks. My friends had all gotten closer without me being there, and then coming back and people being like, "Where were you? I thought you died." And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks. No, I did not this time, but thank you." It's like it's very awkward. It's not understanding for a lot of it. And for me, I was dealing with a lot of more severe symptoms to my mental illness that required more attention. But I think for that school, like the friends can be very supportive. And now I have like my partner who is the one of the most supportive people in my life. And I think it depends on the person. I think friends can be considered support systems, therapists, in school counselors, anybody who makes you feel or makes you feel like you can confide in them, you can be vulnerable with them, is can be considered your support system. Anybody who makes you feel safe.
Looking back, what could the school have done to make it better for you?
I think for me, there wasn't much that they could do. For me, it was a lot of the social aspect of the school.
Okay.
I um I know at one point we had let the school know I had gosh, an IEP, I think is what it was
Yeah,
called.
that's what
And
I
a
do.
lot of yeah, a lot of the teachers were not informed on my IEP and what I was allowed to do. I had it written in my IEP that I could listen to music in class. I would get yelled at, singled out for that, which was what made things worse.
Oh,
Um,
it breaks my heart.
yeah,
That's my profession. Is I'm a
it's
special ed teacher. So, did you have a 504, do you know, or was
I
it
might have. I don't
okay, yeah, because
remember.
I know you didn't need any academic support, so you just
Yeah.
needed some accommodations,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so typically that's called a 504 if it's the same,
Mm,
it's called a 504. So you don't really need you don't need any academic support, which would be me. But you do need some accommodations and supports in the general ed setting
mhm,
to help you be successful. And
mhm.
so that's very sad for me to hear that because how easy would that have been for them to accommodate you in those ways?
And I noticed too, it's easier to tell with somebody to measure somebody's struggles with academic because at least you can see it in
Yes.
their grades and like there's evidence. And for me, um I was really quiet. I had a hard time paying attention in class. I daydreamed a lot because I wasn't really there
Sure.
in the mental sense. I remember even just in my mental health journey, feeling like I could speak more about mental health, and then coming back to my public school or going to my public school and feeling like, oh well, I can talk about this, immediately getting shut down. And I remember talking to my teacher about something. I think it was in regards to a symptom that I experienced called dissociation, where you don't feel totally present. You don't feel depersonalization is another word for it,
Okay.
where you don't feel super present in your own body. You're kind of more, if you feel very foggy, it's not very pleasant. But I remember speaking to my teacher. I don't remember if it was in regards to just like how I was feeling in class or just my general feelings, and her looking at me and going, "That's so weird." And I'm like, you have a sign on your door that says this is a safe space.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be I wish more schools not like not only taught their teachers more about mental health because it especially with social media becoming more um it's more prevalent 100%. And I think if teachers got more awareness or at least like a better overview of like what some kids might be dealing with, especially growing up in such a digital age,
Absolutely. I
as well
agree.
as for just like students, like your friends might be dealing with some things that they don't feel like they can talk to you about because of comments that you make and things that are not super aware, that make it difficult for more people to come out and share. And I think especially in a environment such as like a school where there are teachers and there it's supposed to be a supportive learning environment, it truly needs to be, especially with the amount of mental health problems that a lot of teens experience, especially when they're dealing with social media everywhere.
Right.
Um, I can imagine how many more kids are struggling just because of the presence of social media, the influencers who edit their bodies and don't say that they are. It's all lies. Like social media, I have.
The social media, like the people that they follow, it could be
Mm,
families that they follow, and they're getting such a misrepresentation of what a family is. These people who they have absolutely everything. And even there, I remember the damn elf on the shelf, where the elf would bring a present to the kid every day. And then I've got my kids going, why doesn't bring us a present every day? And it's like that because that's not real life, you know? And so the happiness of families, it's not real and it makes kids and not only the kids who want to look like people who are on social media, but it makes them y- long for that type of family.
Mm.
And it really does give such a false representation of what real life is. It's the devil, is really what it is.
And I think as a teenager too, it seems so much more important to me to be on social media because everybody else I knew was on social media.
Right.
Um, I deleted TikTok. I have Instagram and that's it.
Yep.
I don't even go on. And speaking on those family channels, it seems like every day I see something that's a story about, oh well, this YouTuber, this family, they are actually dealing with all of this stuff,
Right.
or they are treating their kids horribly
Yep.
and making them I have such a problem with anybody who films their child, especially when they're not old enough, agree to that. And those families can control what you see. They can edit out the moments that they don't want you to see. And for me, I think seeing those sorts of things where this is such a false presentation of somebody's life, and then scrolling through 6-second videos all day long, it felt more brain rotting, and and even for me now in the place that I am, I can see how much better my mental health is just by deleting the app
Right.
because it's I want to be more in real life is what I realized. It took me quite a bit of time to realize that, but being present in this moment and not being the phone makes it easier to go off into the past or the present. I mean,
Right.
the past or the future, where you start to get anxious, where it's just much easier to overthink and kind of get spiraled and lost in your thoughts. And
Good.
none of that matters.
Right.
Here matters, the now matters, because that's all we get.
Don't you think too, though, nowadays kids don't even get together as much as they used to. They will chat online, but they won't get together and go out and do stuff, which drives
It
me.
makes it makes me a little sad. I think I went to the mall the other day and I was like, this makes me sad.
There were no
This
kids
makes
there
me
then.
really sad to go to the mall just around and hang out and window shop. And
Yes,
that was
absolutely.
fun. I get happy when I see kids playing outside. I'm like, oh, thank God, there's a child like playing catch outside right now,
Yeah, we were
not
never
in.
home. Your mom and I mean, we were all never home. It's so different, and I think it does definitely impact your mental health, and I worry about it constantly. I feel more worried about my daughter than my son. I don't know, I think it's different. Friendships and things like that are for the most part different with boys. I in my experience in my teaching career and and in raising a boy and a girl, I
Mm.
do think it's different. I worry about how it affects the girls more.
I 100% agree. Actually, and my mom used to say this to me when I was growing up, and I didn't believe her for a little bit. She would always tell me never be in a group of friends that is three girls.
Oh,
And
I tell that to my daughter.
I at the time I was like, "Oh, well, mom, like that doesn't make any sense." And it's not out of misogynism, it is out of experience. And
Right.
what I experienced, every friendship that I had since 5th grade, and this is a lot of what contributed to my struggles, every friendship or every friend group that I had since 5th grade, almost every single one was a group of three girls, and I would always get left out. And it destroyed my self-confidence. It made me feel unwanted. And I felt like no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't be one of the favorites. And I think a lot of times, a lot of friends or people my age at the time too would see that insecurity and take advantage of it. And I think that, like looking back now, I can see how that has impacted me today, where I'm less likely to open up to people. I'm more introverted. It takes me a little bit I'm pretty reserved at first, especially when I meet new people in person. It definitely still sticks with me a little bit. It's still something that I think I'm working on, but it did change a lot for me.
Could go back to that and knowing at the time, what do you think if you could go back there, would you say to yourself or do in those situations? Because this is exactly the situation that my daughter is in. Exactly that situation.
It's tricky because I wish I could just go back and instill within myself a sense of self-worth.
Right.
Uh, that was one of my biggest struggles is that I did not feel worthy. I did not see any worth in myself, and I completely depended on other people's validation to fill that spot. Uh,
Okay.
and so for the times where I was having friend troubles, I saw that as because I had no self-worth myself as a direct sign that I was not worth anything. If I could go back, I wish I could say something that would have convinced me that I could give me self-worth, but I don't think that there's anything that could have been said.
I right. That's the
I
hard
think
part,
yeah.
is when you look at it through a child's brain is,
Mhm.
like we said before, there is no other way than the way you're feeling, you
Exactly.
know?
And with those feelings being so intense, it can at points it can be the only thing that you feel, only thing that has ever been felt for you. It's
Right.
so overwhelming, it's so prevalent that that feels like all there is. And I think being able to focus on those little moments of, okay, like I've been feeling so sad. The next time I feel happy, I'm going to really notice it. I'm going to pay attention to it and I'm going to sit in my body and I'm going to experience that feeling and notice where I feel happiness in my body. I wish I could. I think if anything, I would have tuned in more to myself. I think focusing on myself, finding the things that made me happy, not things that other people liked that I just made adjustments for myself to fit their mold, but sitting with myself and just noticing different parts where I felt there's certain things. One of the things I am actually still working on is getting so anxious or so overwhelmed, especially like with work and things, it makes me like either really frustrated, really irritable, or like I get way more overwhelmed than I need to be. Is taking a moment to just sit, breathe, and be like, okay, I'm feeling anxious. Where am I feeling anxiety in my body right now? And I'll be like, okay, I'm feeling tight in my chest. Put my hand on my chest. Like give myself that physical acknowledgement. That has been very helpful for me is and it helps me get to know myself a little bit better so that I can actually locate those points that give me that feeling of self-worth. I think a lot of the times I was kind of lost with who I was because I was doing so much for others.
Even at your young age, I think you being so self-aware is so important because I can tell you that at my age, I would say within the last couple years, have just learned a lot about myself. And I don't may not feel like that, but you are so far ahead of the game if you've got that at your young age, because it takes some of us forever. I would say most people don't have that.
And I think this is important for, I guess, any parents who are currently dealing with their kids having severe mental health issues or even just any mental health issues in general, is that it is because of me dealing with all of that at such a young age, dealing with depression, anxiety, friend issues. And I think this is important also for teenagers who are going through this, is that it is directly because of that whole like 4-year period of my life where I was miserable
Right.
that instead of turning to what seemed to be easier,
Sure.
like just being done with it,
Yes.
sticking through that is what has allowed me to have this capacity. And it's because I had to face it head on. And I think we're at a point in time where mental health is talked about more than ever before. I still don't think it's talked about enough. I still
Agree.
don't, there's too many misconceptions, but it is because of the period that I was in at the time and be living in a time where mental health is more openly talked about and there are better treatment options than ever before that I could just deal with it. And I was in a spot then where it was, all right, we're going to knock this out. And it did take a long time, but that initial process, I think now I in comparison to a lot of people my age, I seem a lot older just because of how I carry myself and how I such a process. But it's crazy to look back sometimes and think of myself even at like 19, 18, 19, and I'm only 24. So I
Yeah.
mean, thinking back like even just a few years ago, I'm completely different. I have grown into myself, and I think it is directly because of those struggles that I have been able to become who I am today. And I'm very proud of how far I've come. And I think even just what you were saying about that not awareness, like when you know what it is, you can deal with it. That I think for for teens, like that emotional sort of like unawareness that I was having where I just didn't know what I was feeling. I think a lot of that with also just adapting who I was to fit the mold of what my friends wanted me to be is what made that so much harder. So I think all of it, just meshes together to create that full picture. And you have to work on so much. All the different aspects will need adjustments to create a better, healthier, happier life for yourself. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it 100%.
Absolutely.
I think parents play a very important role in just teaching how to healthy communication. I think the way that you speak to your child teaches them how to speak to others.
Yes.
Boundaries is a huge one. And then also being able to, I know I had a lot of issues with my mom, and my mom, I've always been close. We've always been best
Right, of
friends.
course, but still,
Um,
yeah.
but in that early stage, it was very difficult for us. We had some friction.
Sure.
Um, but it was when she started learning the coping skills that I was being taught. I was doing specifically dialectical behavioral therapy, which is DBT. The biggest difference is when she started learning DBT along with me. When she knew the skills that I was learning, she could pull those skills, use them for herself, use them for how she communicated with me, and also use them as suggestions for support for me to feel better. And I think that sort of hand in hand, can really make the difference. So
Sometimes us as parents, we take everything so personally. Like, what did
mhm,
I do? I can't make her happy. I can't make her better. I can't, you know what I mean? I can't do this for
mhm,
him. So what's going to happen? And we take everything as our fault. And
mhm.
so to be able to, for your mom to for her to be able to take that piece out of it, and instead of thinking, "What did I do wrong?" and putting herself into the position to then be able to help you get through it. That's a whole different level of strength as a parent.
Yeah.
That too, needs to be commended because I mean, no more than anybody else, how much she probably struggled during that time.
Oh, mhm,
And so she's struggled right along with you. And so for
mhm.
her to step out and be able to navigate that with you and help you through that, a parent couldn't ask for more to see how you've come out and what you've become. Another thing for you to be, proud of because it could have been very different. And I, for one, am glad it's
Aw.
that you're here with me today.
Yeah, and I don't mean to keep going on, but
Oh,
I think
please.
one of the best things I think any parent can do is just giving space. What can I do for you? What do you need? Instead of suggestions, instead of, oh, well, you should do this, you should do that. Because no teenager wants to hear their parents tell them what to do.
Mm,
But giving the openness and the space and trying your hardest not to judge, it can be difficult because a lot of teenagers can be a little all over the place. I know I was, but trying to create a space with as little judgment as possible and purely just a space to have them talk. And I think that biggest difference. My mom, one of the best things that I think she has been able to do for me is sometimes she can tell now when I'm very like when I'm in certain headspaces, but she'll pull me to the side and just lay with me. She actually came to visit me for my birthday
Yeah.
in August, and I was getting real overwhelmed. I don't know what was going on, but I was very frustrated. She pulled me over. We laid down on the bed, and she just held me. And I'm 24, and I love it.
No,
But
for
she
sure.
knew exactly, like, okay, you don't want to talk about this. Let's just lay down and be together, and I'll give you that comfort that you need in a
Yeah.
different way than like verbal
Right.
suggestions, you know?
Right.
That can make a huge difference. It does take a lot of time to learn that sort of thing, but she was in it for a long time
Yeah, so
figuring
I'll
it
say
out.
that restraint because we want to tell you how to solve it. So, I mean, that was my last question was what are the do's and don'ts? What
Mhm.
should we do and what shouldn't we do? Because you want to say, okay, what's wrong? Okay, well, maybe do this, 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 this. And
And I think those sorts of conversations where you just give that open space make it easier for them to come to like for teenagers to come to their parents in the future when they're dealing with something. Because instead of the forefront of their mind being like, okay, I have this problem. If I go to my parent about it, they're just going to tell me what to do when that's not what I want. Instead, it's like it gives you that space, that opportunity to go to your mom, your dad, and tell them about your issues because now you feel like you can,
yeah,
um, because you have that experience in the past of, oh well, when I sat down with mom last time and told her about my issues, she really wanted me to just tell her all about it and just wanted to hear about it and wanted to hear what I wanted to do or what I thought would make it better. That can make a lot of impact on like future issues and that sort of future willingness. I think
is
it's difficult for everybody involved,
it is.
parents, kids, yeah.
It is. We don't want you to hurt you. We don't want you
Mhm.
to have the hurt that we had, or we don't want you to just hurt in general.
Mhm.
So it's and if kids sometimes if kids only knew that too, it's like we are coming from a good place. I know it's not what anybody wants to hear, but sometimes we are coming from a really good place.
I think a lot of that I misunderstood with my mom. It did take a lot, but I think that time, her sticking with me that whole time, even when I was just awful to be around. Looking back now, it's like, yeah, she made the difference. I did a lot of and she always every time I tell her this, she's like, "No, it was all you." And I'm like, "No, but you helped me so much." It's great. I have a better relationship with my mom than ever. She's my best friend, and I think it's because of all of that just stuff we went through together that I don't think there's going to be anybody who can be the way my mom is to me. She's everything. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
to go through all of that and in the end that just shows you the love of a parent to know that she is there from the beginning, she was there in the middle, and she was there in the end. You can look back and think
Mhm.
that is what a mom should be. That's what I got. And
Yeah.
so the love of a parent is something that you don't understand until you are one, and it just runs as deep as anything could put there anything there is. So
Mhm.
you got yourself a good one.
I do. I do. I got the best one. She's amazing.
Do you have any books, resources, anything that you could recommend for maybe a teen or maybe a parent who's dealing with somebody? Do you any recommendations? If not, that's okay. I just thought I would ask.
I actually wrote some down so I did not forget.
Great. Okay.
There is a book called The Four Agreements that I was recommended to read, and it is four universal truths to live your life by. And that book I found very helpful. There's another book called Radical Acceptance. That is actually it's that sort of thing I was talking about, just accepting the world as it is, that you're just a little blip. That is radical acceptance. So this book is called Radical Acceptance, Embracing Your Life with the Heart of a Buddha. DBT was actually based on a lot of Zen practices. And I find a lot of Zen practices to be very helpful for mindfulness in general. For mental health resources, samsa.com or .gov It's samhsa.gov. It stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, and they provide a lot of really helpful overviews and resources, especially for people who are not familiar with certain mental health struggles. Also, nimh.gov is the National Institute of Mental Health Resources,
Did you say
and
N or M?
N as
Okay.
it, yeah, N as in Nancy. So
My mom
they're
always
really
laughs because
great.
I say N as in Nicole, and makes her laugh every time because Nicole's my middle name. So I'll say N as Nicole. She'd be like, "Will you stop it?" Everybody says Nancy.
I love that. And I know we were talking about influencers and such and how before, but I find it important to reiterate to not take mental health advice from social media because a lot of those people just want to make money off of you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Trust the .govs, trust the scientists and psychologists on this one because there's a lot that we think we know that is not correct. Did also write down some specific skills, like coping skills that I have thought of if you'd be interested
Please.
in hearing.
Yes, please, please.
Um, there was just because DBT itself was so helpful for me specifically, but I think this can be helpful for teens and for parents. Just mindfulness, that being present, practicing gratitude has been very important for me. I do that. I write down 3 things I'm grateful for before I start work every day. Breathing exercises are really helpful for anxiety and panic attacks, such as the box breath, which is counting. You look at a box or a square or a wall and you count 4 going up, inhale, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, and it gives you that repeating. And then sorry, just going off here, but
Oh, please do.
some specific DBT skills I thought of that could be helpful for anybody. There's a skill called FAST, which is a really great interpersonal effectiveness skill, like communication skill. So it's an acronym. F for be fair to yourself and the other person. A, don't over apologize. No apologizing for making requests or stating what you need because you should never apologize for telling somebody what you need.
I love
Um,
it.
S for sticking to your values. Don't sell out your integrity for somebody else and be clear on what you think is the moral and correct way of thinking. And then T, be truthful. Don't lie and don't over exaggerate any negative feelings that you're experiencing.
Girl, I love that so much.
I was curious. I remembered one that I still use too, and if you'd like to try it with me, I
Sure.
thought it might be kind of fun if you'd
Yeah,
like.
absolutely.
So this one is called willingness and half smile. So willingness is that accepting that you're a part of a world greater than yourself. And half smile is a really great way of demonstrating, and that's why I thought it would be a fun one to do is demonstrating how the body can communicate with your mind. So if you find like a nice comfortable seat and you can have your hands anywhere, you can do this literally anywhere. Then
Okay.
just take in nice deep breaths, and it allowing yourself to accept reality right now with your whole body. Just taking that in and accepting all of it, and then going into relaxing your body by like letting go, feeling any tension in your body and trying to like let it melt a little bit. You try to adopt sort of a serene expression, where you bring just the corners of your mouth up and you just kind of hold and you breathe. But that little mouth up
Yeah,
like gives you that brightness in your brain. I don't know what it is,
I could
but
see that
taking a
though.
sec, right? You
Yeah.
kind of get like a lighter feeling. I find those sort of skills where you can just do them literally anywhere, whenever you're feeling something is so helpful.
And I think when you are, you have to be very purposeful. So, given those directions, it
Mhm.
makes you focus on solely that. I've never meditated, so I don't know how to do any of that, but I picture my brain going 1,000 miles an hour and not being able to really just set in.
Mhm. And even just having those steps, just the sort of build up. I occasionally do Zen meditation. I'm trying to be better at it. Even just like the visualization for like, oh, my brain feels like it's gonna burst with all this stuff. taking a moment to breathe and just visualizing a big old bright light washing your brain of all those noisy thoughts. Just, okay, I'm going to imagine myself. My brain is surrounded in bright white light and it's clearing everything that a negative. That sort of like just little visualizations
I
can be
love
really
that.
helpful in just
Yeah.
getting you through the day.
I'm finding it more difficult to shut my brain off because I am teaching and then I'm doing the podcast and I'm doing social media pages. I'm a parent, sports, there's dinner, there's laundry, there's so I'm having a really difficult time finding a spot where I can just
Mhm.
slow myself down. So I think I'm going to be trying that one because I can do that anywhere.
You'll have to let me know how it goes. I,
Yeah,
um, I noticed that when I'm, like, at work is even on my breaks, I'll be like, "Okay, well, I'll just do this quick to-do list."
right.
No, I'm gonna close my eyes and I'm gonna pay attention to my breath for, like, 5 minutes. I'm gonna give myself that 5 minutes because I need it.
I am so thankful for you. I truly appreciate you being on with us. I learned so much. I have so much respect for you. So
Aw.
thank you. Do this again so we can, bring some more information because I want parents to know what they can do to, to guide them through some of this stuff because there are so many people out there with, especially in my age bracket with teens and I think this needs to be talked about more. Thank you for joining me. As always, do better, expect better, and be better, and find a way to laugh through it all. Don't forget to check out my Shopify where you can find some Do Better merchandise and coming soon, some t shirts and sweatshirts with the Laugh Through It All logo.